this from a get-rich-quick perspective, you're looking at it wrong. Work to improve yourself first, and the money will naturally follow.
Как-то раз я просто залипал в ютубчик и жевал бутеры, как вдруг... Я что, попал в игру? Вот дела.
Dear fellow scholars, this is 2-minute papers with Dr. Károly Zsolnai Fehér. This paper is really something else. Scientists at NVIDIA came up with an absolutely insane idea for video conferencing. Their idea is not to do what everyone else is doing, which is transmitting a video to the person on the other end. No, of course not. That would be too easy. What they do in this work is take only the first image from this video and they throw away the entire video afterwards. But before that, it stores a tiny bit of information from it, which is how our head is moving over time and how our expressions change. That is an absolutely outrageous idea, and of course we like those around here. So, does this work? Well, let's have a look. This is the input video. Note that this is not transmitted, only the first image and some additional information, and the rest of this video is discarded. And hold on to your papers, because this is the output of the algorithm compared to the input video. No, this is not some kind of misunderstanding. Nobody has copy-pasted the results there. This is a near-perfect reconstruction of the input, except that the amount of information we need to transmit through the network is significantly less than with previous compression techniques. How much less? Well, you know what's coming, so let's try it out. Here is the output of the new technique, and here is the comparison against H.264, a powerful and commonly used video compression standard. Well, to our disappointment, the two seem close. The new technique appears better, especially around the glasses, but the rest is similar. And if you have been holding on to your paper so far, now squeeze that paper, because this is not a reasonable comparison, and that is because the previous method was allowed to transmit 6 to 12 times more information. Look, as we further decrease the data allowance of the previous method, it can still transmit more than twice as much information, and at this point there is no contest. This bitrate would be unusable for any kind of video conferencing, while the new method uses less than half as much information and still transmits a sharp and perfectly fine video. Overall, the authors report that their new method is 10 times more efficient. That is unreal. This is an excellent video reconstruction technique, that much is clear. And if it only did that, it would be a great paper. But this is not a great paper. This is an absolutely amazing paper, so it does even more. Much, much more. For instance, it can also rotate our head and make a frontal video, can also fix potential framing issues by translating our head and transferring all of our gestures to a new model. And
это как у тебя оформление, что видите? Ладно, я восполнял тихо.
Did well, so all of these features are tested in isolation. So, look at these two previous methods trying to frontalize the input video. One would think that it's not even possible to perform properly given how much these techniques are struggling with the task, until we look at the new method. My goodness, there is some jumpiness in the neck movement in the output video here, and some warping issues here, but otherwise very impressive results. Now, if you have been holding onto your paper so far, squeeze that paper, because these previous methods are not some ancient papers that were published a long time ago. Not at all. Both of them were published within the same year as the new paper. How amazing is that? Wow! I really liked this page from the paper, which showcases both the images and the mathematical measurements against previous methods side by side. There are many ways to measure how close two videos are to each other. The up and down arrows tell us whether the given quality metric is subject to minimization or maximization. For instance, pixel-wise errors are typically minimized, so lesser is better, but we are to maximize the peak signal-to-noise ratio. And the cool thing is that none of this matters too much as soon as we insert the new technique, which really outpaces all of these. And we are still not. So we said that the technique takes the first image, reads the evolution of expressions and the head pose from the input video, and then it discards the entirety of the video, save for the first image. The cool thing about this was that we could pretend to rotate the head pose information, and the result is that the head appears rotated in the output image. That was great. But what if we take the source image from someone and take this data, the driving key point sequence, from someone else? Well, what we get is motion transfer. Look, we only need one image of the target person, and we can transfer all of our gestures to them in a way that is significantly better than most previous methods. Now, of course, not even this technique is perfect. It still struggles a great deal in the presence of occluder objects, but still, just that this is possible feels like something straight out of a science fiction movie. What you see here is a report of this exact paper we have talked about, which was made by Weights and Biases. I put a link to it in the description.
La Finlande reste le pays le plus heureux du monde, et ce, pour la 4e année consécutive. Le classement réalisé depuis 2012 sous l'égide de l'ONU compare 150 pays selon plusieurs critères, comme le PIB, des indices de solidarité, de liberté individuelle, de corruption ou encore le propre ressenti des habitants. Et pour les Finlandais, leur pays ne manque pas d'atouts. Je pense que nous pouvons simplement vivre en sécurité, manger à notre faim, respirer un air pur. Nos enfants peuvent aller à l'école et tout le monde peut accéder aux plus hautes positions dans la société. Je pense que ce sont d'assez bons ingrédients. Le bonheur, c'est le contraire de l'inquiétude. Et ici, les choses se passent plutôt bien. C'est facile d'aller se coucher tous les soirs sans se faire trop de soucis. Plusieurs facteurs peuvent expliquer la première place de la Finlande, comme son très haut niveau de vie, ses services publics performants et ses vastes étendues de nature. Des spécificités qui ont permis aux habitants de garder le moral.
Before I got into game development, I used to watch Crysis physics tests. In these wonderful videos, people would spend hours carefully placing thousands of barrels only to knock them over and blow them up. There's just something oddly satisfying about watching crazy amounts of game objects colliding. Anyone who's ever discovered the rigid body component knows this. I remember adding my first rigid body to the test cube and watching it fall as I marveled at my creation. I thought, the possibilities with this are endless. But are they? Let's put Unity to the test and see just how many rigid bodies it can handle before slowing down. I started by putting a few cubes in a simple scene with default settings. One directional light, real-time shadows, and 50 cubes. So I tried with 500. Then 1500. Things were still running smoothly. Of course my frame rate was dropping, but it was still around the 100 mark. I began to feel like I could keep this number infinitely. At 3000 cubes, my frame rate started falling below 30, but I couldn't stop there. I increased the total amount of cubes to just over 6000, and the result was, well, with an average FPS of 2, there was room for improvement. So I started by increasing the fixed time step. This value determines the amount of time between physics calculations. So naturally, if we increase it, the rate of these calculations will be reduced, and so Unity will spend less time on physics each second. This led to some very clear improvements. Just increasing it from the default 0.02 to 0.04 effectively tripled my frame rate. Setting it to 0.06 resulted in an average FPS of 14, and going all the way up to 0.1 gave a reasonable average frame rate of 24. 1 gave a reasonable average frame rate of 24. The problem with raising the fixed time step too much is that you start to be able to see each physics update, which makes our collisions look laggy again. A fixed time step of 0.1 means 10 physics updates per second, which is definitely noticeable. And on top of that, I was still seeing massive frame drops. So next I turned to graphics quality. If we could spend less time on graphics, we might be able to allocate more time to physics. So I tuned the render settings all the way down and disabled the scene light. This definitely helped, but it didn't make as big an impact as I was hoping. If we look at the profile, it's pretty clear why. Actually, rendering the scene only took up around 10% of the processing time, so making the scene easier to render wouldn't make too much of a difference. Finally, I turned to the physics settings. I tried adjusting all the values, but nothing seemed to work, except for when I turned on adaptive force. Adaptive force is a special technique in physics that compensates for numerical errors when dealing with a stack of objects. Since we are stacking 6,000 cubes on top of each other, I think it applies here. And just as predicted, my average frame rate went from 24 to 33, and more importantly, instead of dropping all the way down to 3 FPS when things got the most tough, it will now stay above 16. But before we start praising this setting, there's something we have to take into consideration. Look at interpolation, extrapolation, collision detector. Editor itself comes with a bit and spawn a cube on each vertex. This way I could create models in Blender.
Спать.
Знаете, как семилетний ребенок Райан Гадзи заработал на ютубе 22 миллиона долларов. Если нет, закройте это видео. Если...
Guys, I finally did it! I managed not to miss out on a game jam. That's right, the second practice game jam just got wrapped up and the review process has now started. We got 333 entries, which is not only amazing, it is also apparently an angel number. So if that excites you, yay! Anyway, the goal for the jam was to make a game from scratch in only 1 week. The theme was Love is Blind, which the admins from the forum was so kind as to hide from me until it got announced, which meant that I got to experience the usual emotional roller coaster of, ooh, that's really cool. Wait a minute, I have no idea what to make with that. I'll never get another idea in my life again. Ooh, that might work. Let's do this. So my first thought when hearing the theme was, that's a really good Get White song. The next thought was to make a puzzle platformer. Yes, that was literally how it went. So far most of my jam games have been score-based, the kind of games where you over and over again in an effort to do better. However, for this game I really wanted to try my luck with something different, so I went with a more level-based structure. This of course meant that I had to delve into the vast and daunting world of level design. The basic idea of the game was this: 2 players must collaborate to make it to their date. Because the characters are in love, they are blind to everything the other player touches. The 2 players need to both work around this and use it as an advantage to help each other succeed. And with that, it was time to get cracking. But first, this video is sponsored by Jason Wyman. He's the creator of the amazing Unity 3D masterclass, which takes you all the way from the very fundamental